You didn't just watch a routine royal health update. You watched a 1,000-year-old system reach its absolute breaking point. Tonight, we aren't just talking about a king and his heir standing side by side. We are talking about the moment the most carefully controlled institution in the world finally admitted it can bleed. This wasn't a statement. It was a confession. For months, the silence from Buckingham Palace has been deafening. We were fed polished lines about planned surgeries and successful recoveries, but behind the heavy gates of Windsor, a different story was being written. A story of secrecy, control, and a desperate struggle to maintain the fairy tale facade. But you can't keep a future queen hidden forever without the world asking, who knew what and when? The monarchy doesn't just manage feelings, it manages perception. And that perception began to shatter the moment King Charles realized that privacy had become a dangerous shield for delaying an uncomfortable truth. We've watched this pattern before in every fragile institution that is more afraid of the truth than it is of a scandal. When a system depends so heavily on one or two human faces to justify its existence, a medical crisis isn't just a family tragedy. It is an existential survival test for the entire crown. Tonight, I'm walking you through the secret protocol. This isn't just about a medical chart. It's about a radical reset. It's about the night King Charles looked at his heir, Prince William, and decided, no more hiding. We are pulling back the curtain on the fights behind closed doors, the leaks that forced their hand, and the moment the palace machine realized that honest vulnerability was the only currency they had left to save the future of the British monarchy. If you are tired of being fed polished PR lines without the cold, hard context of power, this is for you. Because if the monarchy wants to survive a world that just watched its emotional center nearly slip away, it can't go back to pretending that nothing ever breaks behind those palace walls. To understand why King Charles had to activate a secret protocol, we have to go back to the months of deafening silence that nearly brought the British monarchy to its knees. It started with a whisper, a planned and successful abdominal surgery. The palace machine, fueled by 1,000 years of protocol, thought they could manage the optics by simply saying nothing. They told us Princess Kate needed space and recovery. But in the world of 21st century media, silence isn't a shield. It's a vacuum that gets filled with chaos. Day after day, the public looked for a reassurance photo, a single wave from a window, or a genuine update. Instead, we saw schedules being cancelled with no explanation. We saw Prince William, the future king, abruptly pulling out of a memorial service for his own godfather, citing personal matters. You don't lose sight of a princess for months by accident. This wasn't just a medical recovery. This was a system in panic management. The palace tried to control reality itself. They relied on the old-school narrative that everything is fine, even as the gears of the institution were grinding to a halt. But while they were protecting the image of the family, they were destroying the trust of the people who fund this institution with their taxes. When a public institution uses privacy to hide the condition of a central symbolic figure, it stops being a family and starts being a mystery box. The tension inside the walls was reaching a boiling point. Inside the palace, the advisors were fighting to keep the mask on, while the reality was far worse than anyone in power wanted to admit out loud. This silence wasn't a strategic choice to protect Kate. It was a failure of a system that is more afraid of the truth than of a scandal. The secret protocol was born out of this failure, because King Charles realized that if the crown didn't stop hiding, it wouldn't have anything left to save. Behind the heavy oak doors of Adelaide Cottage and the fortified walls of Windsor, a war was being waged not against an outside enemy, but against the very machine that was built to protect the crown. While the public was being fed generic updates, the atmosphere inside was electric with tension. Reliable sources confirmed that a deep, bitter conflict had erupted between Prince William and the palace's senior communications team. On one side stood the men in gray suits, desperate to maintain the "everything is fine" narrative at any cost. On the other stood a husband and a father, Prince William, who was watching the system he was born to lead fail the woman he loved. The mask didn't just slip, it was torn off by the reality of a medical crisis that was far more serious than the official statements ever allowed the cameras to see. Whispers began to leak from the London clinic, rumors of unexpected complications, and a recovery that was not going as planned. These weren't just gossip. They were distress signals from a system that was starting to buckle under the weight of its own secrets. The turning point came with a reported internal email that sent shockwaves through the royal household. The subject line was a direct challenge to centuries of protocol. "She deserves more than silence." This wasn't just a suggestion. It was an admission that the palace's obsession with optics had become a weapon against its own family members. William was faced with an impossible choice: protect the dignity of the institution by staying silent, or protect his wife by demanding the truth be told. For the first time in modern history, the future king saw that the palace machine, the very Kumai Kung Din designed to polish the image, was actually suffocating the reality. This conflict exposed the ultimate royal paradox. A monarchy that is humanized to gain popularity is also vulnerable to human tragedy. If the palace couldn't tell the truth about a sick mother, how could they expect the people to trust them with anything else? This wasn't just an internal disagreement. It was the moment the old rules of the monarchy died. The moment the royal machine truly broke wasn't during a heated press briefing or a leaked memo. It happened in the heavy, sterile quiet of a hospital bedside. King Charles, a man who has spent over 7 decades living by the ironclad mantra of never complain, never explain, saw Kaiji Do in that room that terrified him more than any tabloid headline or Republican protest ever could. He saw a daughter-in-law, the woman who holds the emotional center of this monarchy together, fighting a battle that no amount of palace spin or polished PR could fix. This was the point of no return. Charles didn't just leave that hospital room, he walked straight into a confrontation with the very institution he had spent his entire life waiting to lead. For years, the palace has operated like a grand, ancient house with cracking walls. Their strategy has always been to hang more beautiful paintings and adjust the lighting to hide the decay. But as Charles looked at Kate, he realized that you cannot fix a structural crack by pretending it isn't there. You have to look directly at it. He issued a directive that sent shockwaves through the corridors of power. No more hiding. It was an executive override of the men in gray suits, who were still desperately clinging to the idea of privacy as a shield for delaying the truth. When a king has to overrule his entire court just to tell the truth, it exposes a profound malfunction in the wheels of power. If the institution is more afraid of truth than it is of scandal, then the institution is already failing. The palace machine always wants to keep the curtains closed on the stage play, to maintain the illusion of the perfect, unbreakable family. But Charles chose to pull the curtain back himself. He realized that the monarchy's survival in the 21st century doesn't depend on a polished fairy tale. It depends on honest vulnerability. By choosing Kate's humanity over the palace's cold optics, he effectively reset the rules of the crown. This wasn't just an update, it was an act of institutional survival. Charles knew that if the monarchy continued to manage perception instead of reality, the ensuing crisis of trust would eventually swallow them whole. The secret protocol was the moment the monarchy was forced to admit it is mortal, that it can bleed, suffer, and struggle just like the millions it rules. The gears of the old machine have stopped, and Charles has just set a new, dangerously human clock in motion. When the world finally saw her, it wasn't through a gilded frame or a royal balcony. It was 94 seconds of raw, fragile honesty that did what the entire palace communications department had failed to do for months. Sitting on a simple wooden bench, surrounded by the spring blooms of Windsor, Princess Kate didn't just give a health update. She delivered a confession that effectively dismantled the palace's outdated PR machine. This video was the ultimate failure of the monarchy script. For weeks, the men in gray suits had tried to manage the narrative with cold, detached statements and planned recovery timelines. But the public didn't want a press release. They wanted a human connection. Kate gave them what the palace machine never could: honest vulnerability. By speaking directly to the camera, using you and your, she bypassed the institution and went straight to the heart of the people. The contrast was staggering. On one side, you had the cold palace statements, impersonal, defensive, and increasingly mistrusted. On the other, you had her warm, fragile honesty. She wasn't just a future queen. She was a mother, a wife, and a woman facing her own mortality. Every word, every pause, and the slight tremor in her voice signaled the end of the fairy tale era. This 94-second video was a masterclass in pushing back the right way. She acknowledged the cancer, she asked for privacy, but she did it on her own terms, in her own voice. She didn't just update her medical chart, she rewrote the monarchy's script. She showed that in the 21st century, the crown's greatest strength isn't its perceived invincibility, but its shared humanity. The message was clear. The era of the unbreakable institution is over. If the monarchy is to survive, it must be able to admit when it is broken. Kate's honesty didn't just save her own narrative. It provided a lifeline for the institution itself, forcing it to adapt to a world that no longer accepts the nothing-to-see-here approach to power and pain. The word remission wasn't just a medical term. It was a fragile lifeline that a drowning institution clung to with desperate hope. When Princess Kate finally shared the news that her cancer was in remission, a collective sigh of relief echoed far beyond the palace walls. But in the cold, analytical corridors of royal power, this joy is seasoned with a lingering, unspoken fear. This wasn't a cure announcement. It was a remission update, and the difference between those two words defines the entire future of the British monarchy. The brutal truth that the men in grey suits must now face is that remission neck cure. It is a state of grace, a temporary peace, but it is not a permanent victory. For King Charles and Prince William, the announcement brought a moment of celebration, but it also cemented a terrifying realization. The crown is now operating in a state of permanent uncertainty. The haunting question, what if it comes back, now hangs invisibly over every royal tour, every charitable engagement, and every strategic decision made for the future queen. This fragile future means the monarchy can no longer pretend that health is just optional background noise to the grand stage play of power. Kate has reset the monarchy's script, but in doing so, she has exposed its greatest vulnerability. If the institution's emotional center is susceptible to the same mortal struggles as the people it serves, then the old protocols of invincibility are officially dead. The palace must now build a future around a central figure who might, at any moment, have to step away to survive. The secret protocol has shifted from a crisis management plan into a long-term strategy for survival. It is no longer about hiding the cracks in the wall. It is about learning to live with them. The monarchy is forced to admit that its most vital asset is mortal, fragile, and human. This isn't just a medical chart update. It is a fundamental shift in how power is exercised and perceived in the 21st century. The fairy tale has been replaced by a reality where recovery is a part-time job and survival is the only true goal. You are witnessing the definitive end of the age of the immortal crown. For centuries, the British monarchy survived on the carefully curated illusion that its central figures were more than just people. They were symbols, icons, seemingly untouchable by the common frailties that affect the rest of us. But the simultaneous health crises of King Charles and Princess Kate have forced the institution to do the unthinkable. Admit that it is mortal. This isn't just a medical update. It is an existential shift in the very structure of the monarchy. The secret protocol has triggered a radical overhaul of the contingency plans for senior royals. In the past, royal schedules were ironclad, sacred documents. Today, they have been replaced by a mortal protocol where engagements are fluid and subject to the cold reality of a medical chart. The palace has been forced to abandon the everything is fine narrative because, in the face of cancer, that narrative became a dangerous lie that threatened to swallow their credibility whole. This shift from invincibility to human vulnerability carries a profound political price. When a public institution depends so heavily on one or two people to humanize the regime, those people becoming sick isn't just a family tragedy. It is a test case for the survival of the entire system. The palace machine is no longer just managing emotions. It is managing the perception of a failing biological reality. They are now planning for a future where a future queen might have to step away just to survive, and a king must balance the weight of the crown with the limitations of his own body. This wasn't transparency by choice. It was truth dragged out at the last possible moment because the fairy tale facade had finally crumbled. By admitting they can bleed, suffer, and break, the royals have traded their perceived divinity for a fragile kind of trust. The gears of the ancient institution have been forced to adapt to human frailty, and in doing so, they have changed the rules of the crown forever. The monarchy is no longer a harmless fairy tale. It is a human institution struggling to survive in real time. The true legacy of Princess Kate isn't found in the titles she holds or the jewels she wears. It is etched into the tear-stained honesty of that 94-second video. For decades, the firm operated as a cold, efficient Maya machine designed to prioritize the symbol over the person. But Kate did something the palace machine never anticipated. She chose her own humanity over the institutional script. By doing so, she didn't just survive a personal crisis. She broke the very cage that has suffocated royal women for generations. Before this crisis, the monarchy's survival strategy was built on the stiff upper lip, a refusal to show weakness that often bordered on the inhuman. We saw what that did to Diana. We saw how it alienated Meghan. But Kate found a third way. She didn't rebel against the institution. She humanized it from the inside out. When she sat on that wooden bench, she wasn't just a princess in recovery. She was a woman telling the world that she can bleed, she can fear, and she can be broken. This was the ultimate act of institutional sabotage. By admitting her mortality, she rendered the palace's old secrecy protocols obsolete. The legacy she is building right now is one of shared vulnerability. She has forced the most guarded family on earth to admit that their greatest strength isn't their perceived divinity, but their shared struggle with the rest of humanity. This reset has fundamentally changed the power dynamic between the crown and the people. You no longer look at Kate and see an untouchable icon. You see a survivor. You see a mother who fought the same silent battles that millions of families are fighting in hospital waiting rooms every single day. But there is a sharp, cold edge to this legacy. By becoming human, she has made the monarchy mortal. The palace can never go back to the days of never complain, never explain, because the public now expects and demands the truth. Kate's humanity has saved the institution's popularity in the short term, but it has also stripped away the mystery that once protected it. She has traded the divine right for a human connection, and in the 21st century, that is the most dangerous and necessary trade a royal could ever make. The institution is no longer a gilded cage, it is a human house, and Kate is the one who finally opened the windows. Prince William is no longer just the heir to the throne. He has become the de facto CEO of a failing family business that is currently in its darkest hour. While King Charles manages the grand strategy of the secret protocol, the brutal day-to-day reality of keeping the monarchy alive falls squarely on William's shoulders. He is standing at a crossroads that no future king should ever have to face. Forced to be the unbreakable symbol of the state, while his personal world, his wife, his father, and the mother of his 3 children is under siege by the most human of enemies. The secret protocol has placed William in a position of agonizing conflict. On one side, he is the enforcer of the no more hiding rule. He is the one who must face the cameras, lead the royal tours, and maintain the stiff upper lip to reassure a nervous public. But on the other side, he is a man haunted by the ghosts of the past. William knows better than anyone what happens when the palace machine eats its own. He saw it happen to his mother, Diana. He is determined that the institution will not consume Kate in the same way, even if it means fighting the very advisors he is supposed to lead. This is the William paradox. To save the future of the crown, he must prioritize Kate's humanity. But to maintain the present stability of the crown, he must appear invincible. We have seen him at public engagements, his face a mask of practiced royal duty, while his mind is clearly miles away at the London clinic or Adelaide cottage. You can see it in the tightening of his jaw, the sudden exits from public events, and the fierce protection of his children's privacy. George, Charlotte, and Louis are the ultimate stakes in this game. William isn't just protecting a princess. He is protecting the psychological health of the next generation of royals. The weight he carries is institutional survival in its purest form. If William breaks, the monarchy breaks. He is the bridge between the old world of silent icons and the new world of honest vulnerability. But being a bridge means being walked on by both sides. He is being pushed by the men in gray suits to do more, to see more, to show more. And he is being pulled by his own heart to do less, to stay home, and to just be a husband. This isn't just a leadership crisis. It is a human endurance test. William is managing the present with a broken heart, all while carrying the terrifying responsibility of a future that has arrived much faster than he ever imagined. We have reached the definitive end of one era and the unsettling dawn of something entirely new, something the Windsor ancestors would likely find unrecognizable. The mask of unbreakable perfection has not just slipped, it has been discarded forever. What remains is a crown learning to breathe in a world that no longer has room for secrets. King Charles's secret protocol was never just a medical contingency plan. It was a radical rewrite of the monarchy's operating system for the 21st century. The trade-off here is brutal, and it is permanent. To earn the trust of a cynical public, the monarchy has had to sacrifice its most potent weapon, mystique. The constitutional essayist Walter Bagehot once famously warned, "We must not let in daylight upon magic." He argued that the monarchy's power lay in its perceived divinity. But Charles and William have realized a terrifying truth. In an age of social media, 24-hour news cycles, and viral conspiracy theories, mystique is no longer a shield, it is a tomb. By choosing to let the daylight in, even when it exposed the scars, the pain, and the mortal fragility of the family, they chose survival over tradition. Princess Kate is now the blueprint for this new crown. She is no longer a fashion icon or a character in a sanitized fairy tale. She is a survivor. Her legacy from this crisis is a monarchy that is more human than it has ever been. But there is a hidden cost to this humanization. When an icon becomes too much like us, it also becomes as vulnerable as us. If the crown can bleed, fear, and suffer just like the millions it rules, then the old justifications for its divine right are officially dead. The question William will eventually have to answer is this: if the monarchy is humanized, is it still necessary? This crisis has passed, but its aftershocks will vibrate through the annals of British history for decades. The Windsors have survived wars, divorces, and scandals, but they have never had to face a silent, biological enemy while simultaneously trying to maintain national stability. By choosing truth over silence, they have bought themselves a second chance. But this chance comes with a cold warning. Truth is a one-way street. Once the curtain has been pulled back, it can never be lowered again. The future of the British monarchy now rests in the hands of a family that is healing in public. They are no longer the untouchable gods on Mount Olympus. They are human actors struggling to serve while they themselves are under siege. This isn't the end of the monarchy. It is its raw, stripped-back rebirth. It is a crown that is no longer fueled by magic, but by the grit, compassion, and resilience of the mortals who wear it. The fairy tale is over. The reality has just begun.